DJ Jimmy Metro here with a very special guest. Back in the day before 93Q was country, it was known as KKBQ FM 93Q Houston's Rock Hits. The format was more modern, contemporary rock and pop. On Saturday nights, a DJ from that radio station would host a local TV show, which was my jam, by the way, called VIDEOCITY. He would interview the most popular musicians in between airings of the most popular music videos in that era. So please welcome the host of VIDEOCITY, one of the most popular, dare I say, one of the coolest DJs from 93Q / musician, Mr. Bob King. Thank you.
Hey, Jimmy. Really, I'm honored to be here. It's nice when someone, obviously this was a long time ago, so, it's nice when people still remember. So appreciate the invite today, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me. So obviously, first question, man, how'd you get the gig?
Well, I started out in college. When I was a kid, I always kind of fantasized, I guess. I had a little tape deck in the basement and turntable and played radio. Disc jockey, invited friends and family in and that sort of thing. Went to college. Worked at a college radio station and worked at a suburban Chicago radio station. And then upon graduation, I got a call from some different stations. They were more smaller market. I could have stayed where I was.
So did you put a resume out, or they were?
Yeah, I had an ad on Radio and Records, I believe was the publication. The story of 93Q goes back to Ernie Brown, who had come to us, worked at a station in Nacogdoches. We really had a major market air staff. Many of us left. But Ernie had come back to school at SFA. He had actually worked at KRBE in Houston.
Really?
So we all were like, oh, it's Ernie Brown. He's been at the big time and all that. Well, he didn't stay very long. John Lander hired him to do 10 to 2 at night on the 79Q. So I had a serious girlfriend at the time. And Ernie didn't think I would be interested in anything part-time. So he asked my roommate, Dave Shea, who, of course, was a disc jockey for many years there, who unfortunately passed away several years ago. Dave was a great guy. We were roommates in Nacogdoches before we came to Houston. But he took a job part-time, and then they hired him full-time for the AM. And then he invited me to take his Saturday night shift. Well, he didn't invite. He put the word out to Lander that I would be interested. The shift was from midnight to 7 overnight on Saturday night into Sunday morning. Okay. And I drove to Houston for several weeks doing that. And then the phone rang about 6 weeks later when I was on the air in Nacogdoches, and it was John's assistant saying, would you be interested in doing 2 to 5 in the morning on the FM? And I'm like, I couldn't believe it. It was like, wow. Because, the station was number 1 at the time. And I couldn't get there fast enough. So I said yes. And that's how I ended up in Houston.
So how did VIDEOCITY come into fruition? Because that came later on, right? Years later?
It did. I did overnights for a while. And then I started doing the morning zoo with John. I was just kind of hanging out. And they asked me to go in and co-host it, or not co-host it, to guest hosted after it had been on the air for about 2 months. And I just got the gig. They just asked me to stay. The concept, if you want to know, and I'd like to give credit here because the whole brainchild of the show was Gene Wall of Off the Wall Productions. And Gene, a real smart guy, realized that back then, if you didn't have cable television, you couldn't see MTV, and MTV was still relatively new and was doing music videos. Now I don't know what they're doing. I haven't watched MTV or VH1 in years, but
it's gotten a little crazy. They've gone off the rails, and it's reality television and stuff now.
Exactly.
But to let you know, like VIDEOCITY for me and the kids in my neighborhood who didn't have MTV, that was a big deal, and
and that was the reason.
We loved it.
Yeah, because you couldn't see the music videos, because a lot of people back then, people don't realize this now. I still feel so old talking about this, but it was 1986 and a lot of people didn't have cable.
Right.
So KPRC Channel 2, Gene Wall went to 93Q and Astro World. It was a joint venture, and then sold the show to KPRC. So we had a KPRC apparently is not just Houston. I mean, people in Austin saw it and whatnot. So the show had ended up actually having some very good ratings, and I was surprised by the, popularity of the show. And but that was all Gene Wall's idea, and we would produce it and edit it every week at Channel 2. And I believe it stayed on the air, like I said, for about 4 years. And it was just a blast. It was different doing television because, when radio, obviously no one sees you.
Right.
And it freaked me out because I had zero television experience. But it really, between the two, 93Q and Videocity, still the two most fun things that I ever did as far as career wise.
That's awesome. Well, it shows. And I want to tell you that when I was watching it, we would all get together and we would wait for it to come on and couldn't wait. We're Thursday, we're like, come on, we get, because, we were the kind of kids that didn't really have a lot to, like, we couldn't afford to go to Astroworld either. So when we saw that was very exciting. And, but no, man, you had just a cool energy and a cool vibe. And, you had the cool lady's haircut and the shorts and it was just like, hey, this
a lot of mousse in that hair, a lot
right
more hair back then than now. But yeah. Before we forget, I do want to say, since I gave a shout out to Gene, the biggest shout out I have to give for any of it ever happening would be for John Lander. He was obviously the creator of 79Q and 93Q. And he, when he came to Houston, no one listened to AM radio anymore. Music radio was all on FM, and 79Q came along before 93. 93 was beautiful music, and they went #1 with music on he just created this phenomenon that was the Q and the Q Morning Zoo, and then of course it went on to the FM for simulcasting. But John Lander was the greatest boss I ever had in my life, and he was just a genius as far as well,
I thought he was just like one of the DJs there, but he had a lot to do with the.
Oh, he was the creator. He had come. He created the Q Morning Zoo with a guy by the name of Shannon who ended up at Z100 in New York. But I believe they started it together in Tampa. But I just wanted to give that shout out to John.
Sure.
He was not he was the creator and the mastermind behind the zoo, and my boss. For many years. He eventually was no longer the program director there and just was the morning show guy. But for the heyday run and all that, John was in charge. I never expected to be doing things like that.
You got to meet Elton too, right?
Yeah, a couple of times.
Was that the big one? Was that the?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Absolutely. This is why I'm doing this.
I'm a piano player, and I'd always followed Elton's career, and I got to meet him in Houston backstage in '84. We already had the station had the whole front row at the summit, and they gave me front row seats, and I was like, oh, that I thought was amazing in itself. And then the day of the show, they called and said, hey, you want to meet Elton tonight? I'm like, oh.
Of course.
And so there's room full of people, right? And he was never going to meet this 50 or 60 people. So they said, look, everyone's walking to the right, go through this curtain to the left. And they took 5 or 6 or 7 of us from the zoo. And, there he was. And another great moment for me with that was, I think it was 88 or 89. We got invited up to Dallas, and he was re-signing with MCA Records, and he was going just in about 5 or 6 different markets to recording studios and having a private party for different radio and television people. And there was 50 of us in this recording studio in Dallas, and he was there with Bernie Taupin, and we got to spend several hours with them. And my buddy said, look, that piano in the middle of the room, he's probably going to do a little concert. So after I talked with him and Bernie, I went and sat by the piano, stood by the piano for like 30 minutes and just waited. And so I can say that I actually stood at the piano and watched him do about an 8 or 9 song concert. So that was an amazing night. The Kiss show in Galveston was a good story. We were
I
doing
bet that
a
was
different.
wild.
It was wild. The story behind that, I believe it was about 90 or 91. Kiss had not played together at that point in time for a while. Now, how long that was, I do not know. They also were not wearing makeup at the time. Well, we got an interview with Gene Simmons at this condo in Galveston, and did the interview and then followed them in the limos and all that to the beach. It was spring break, I believe, and they, without our knowledge, they practiced like 6 or 7 songs, and that's all they did. Yeah, that's all they did. And the crowd was a spring break crowd. There was let's just say that when the 6 or 7 songs ended, they wanted more, and they were not pleased, and a riot broke out. And I was literally on stage doing some interviews there was a keyboard guy back there. I was still doing TV stuff while the show was going on. And we're hiding behind speakers, and I didn't think we were going to get out of there. It got ugly real
So the
quick.
people wanted more. They were like, come on, bring it on.
Yeah,
like, well, we're a little rusty and we need to rehearse a little bit.
Alcohol and spring break does not always mix well, but yeah,
right.
that was a crazy day too. That seems to kind of stick out in my mind. There were a lot, and honestly, sometimes when we all get together and talk, someone will remember something that you've completely forgotten.
Well, I think that one you were talking about where you're behind the speaker at the Kiss concert, I think that one may be up on your channel.
It is.
And I gotta tell you, I love the videos that you've uploaded to that channel, man. And the one that I'd like you to talk about if you can, you have one called The End of the 80s on 93Q. And I love that video for so many reasons, but mainly, I think because you see the sausage being made, there's a lot of pre-recordeds going on.
Yeah.
And can you just talk a little bit about that one? What was the feeling that night?
I don't recall what maybe. I've only got a couple other little videos, and I don't even know where they are anymore, of being in the studio, whether it was me or other people, a couple of brief shots. But it was 1989, and it was New Year's Eve, and I got I drew the short straw or something to do the.
Really, I was wondering about that too. I was wondering if you volunteered for that, or if it was like, well,
no, I didn't volunteer. I did not volunteer for that. I mean, that was the thing. Radio obviously back then was all live, and it's a 24/7 deal, 365. And someone's got to do Christmas morning, someone's got to do New Year's Eve, and all of that. And so actually, once I was told I was doing it, then it's like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. It's the end of a decade. And obviously it was a crazy decade for me and an incredible decade for me. And so I enjoyed putting together the countdown. And so I thought, well, you know what? We were talking before we went live here today about my first camcorder. And it was gigantic. It looked like back like a news channel.
Right.
That's sat on your shoulder.
Was it one of those where you had to have a VHS cassette like this big to pop into that
No,
sucker?
it was actually a Video 8 recorder. It was the first all condensed one by Sony, and I think it cost, it cost about $1,700. Yeah, and it was, but I mean, the whole idea of being able to have video like that. So I brought it to the studio and set it up, and just let it roll from some different angles. And then years later, I thought, well, maybe some people would like to see this. And it really, I think, is the only show that I have on the air there from, because I was there for at least 8 or 9 years. And really, if you look online, there really isn't any video of anyone on the air at 93Q. So
right.
I think people like it for that reason. And people were kind of coming and going. And it was a fun night. I think it's a good way to see how we kind of created the party atmosphere without anyone else really being in the studio. But yeah, it was about 80-90% live.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that video. There's a lot of things going on. I'm pretty sure I was listening that night. So it's cool to like see it years later and go, hey, to kind of feel like I was a part of that in some way.
Yeah, and it's kind of neat that, now, again, I'm not knocking anything, but radio just isn't what it used to be. It's all voice tracked, and, nobody's really, for the most part, live and on the air. And I think it captures an era in a time that just doesn't exist anymore. And it's one of the reasons I really, never got back into the business. It just started changing real quickly. We went from being able to do John Lander saying, hey, I don't care what you do as long as it's funny. You'll hear from me or my assistant if it's not good, if it's not funny, but otherwise have at it. We went from that to consultants coming in and saying, if you can't say it in 13 seconds, don't open the microphone. Wow. And so that's when I knew the writing was on the wall, that it was time to do something different. I don't enjoy that,
Well, I'll tell you what we do enjoy is seeing you playing music and doing the cover songs.
Music's a passion for me. I do that for my own benefit. I do play in a church locally. I would like to play in a band, I think, but I don't know. It's a hard business. I love music and I like to, so I do it really for my own benefit. I decided, well, I'll start putting them up, on YouTube. But music is just a passion for me, and one of the main reasons I got into radio to begin with, because I love playing music.
So other than that, what are you up to nowadays, and where can the fans go to find your content?
I have the YouTube channel, Bob King, 59, where I post all of that. As far as professionally, I've been in sales and marketing for years, and about 2 years ago, a friend of mine has a company called Speakeasy Communications. We are in public safety. Real briefly, we go into buildings that are large, whether it be an Amazon warehouse, a hospital, a school, whatever. Two-way radios for emergency responders have to work throughout these facilities, whether they're 1 story or 100. And when they don't, we have to put in, fire code requires boosting for that. So we do cellular and two-way radio boosting across the country, and I do sales and marketing for them.
Cool. And that's based in Houston?
Yep. Well, we're in Houston, and but we work nationally. Yeah. I enjoy it. It's nice to do something that, for public safety and for our first responders. So I do enjoy the work.
I really appreciate your time today. Maybe we can do it again one day.
Absolutely, Jimmy.
I love it. So
like I said, it's nice. It's always nice to be remembered. Once in a while you run into people like, oh yeah, oh wow, I remember that. So it's nice to be remembered.
In closing, let me say you had a very positive impact on me back then, and for you to have allowed me to show that gratitude for that and sharing your time with me today is not only a powerful thing, but also an empowering thing. Oh. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you,
and,
sir.
Thanks for being on, because it means
not a problem, Jimmy. My pleasure, sir.
Absolutely. So we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. I'm DJ Jimmy Metro with Bob King saying, "Carry on, my wayward son.
There'll be peace when we are done, my friend." Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, sir.